So, welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and welcome to FORNOST. This is of course going to be another new patch preview and another one of these maps which has been really making up the backbone of all of the preview matches that I've shown on the new patch, where we see these settlements get given a much more distinctive and individual look for themselves as well, whereas in the past this has been sort of the preserve of some of the more iconic settlements that we've seen, Minas Tirith and Edoras and the like. Now we're seeing many of these settlements actually gain their own identity, rather than just being a normal medieval 2 city that's been tarted up in some ways, shall we say. I think there was a version in Divide and Conquer of FORNOST, which is quite different to this, if I'm remembering correctly, albeit the walls remind me a little bit more of that as well. And I like the fact that a lot of these settlements as well are now incorporating a little bit more thought into the internal defences as well, which tends to be how these medieval 2 sieges do play out after all. This is a rather striking settlement as well. Looks like it's seen better days, which is rather appropriate, I suppose. But yeah, this is the first of these sort of more Arnorian settlements, I suppose, that we've seen from these new previews so far. So we're going to see both Arthedain and Cardolan attempt to defend what is in effect their homeland after all, and we're going to be seeing a force of evil on the attack. So we'll start off with the attackers first and foremost before having a closer look at the settlement and the defending armies. Starting off with Mevin over here commanding one of the Angmarim armies. Unsurprising to see Angmar once again come to make Arnorian lives miserable. A troll catapult, the crew itself obviously a little bit more a little bit bigger than it used to be, and obviously the catapult crew themselves as well are going to be trying to crumble down sections of wall. Very important in any siege battle like this, of course, that you can really try and turn that to your advantage. Blackwatch Legion, mass pushing units like this are still a real threat to defenders. The Blackwatch Legion don't have the numbers perhaps that something like the Blackguard of Rhudaur have over in Mordor. The relationship between those 2 units, and I think a couple more have that distinction now as well, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, very much the same sort of thing here. If you find yourself getting bogged down as attackers, one way that you can try and force the issue is with a unit like this, but do be aware, of course, that if it fails, you're going to have ended up losing a fairly expensive unit in the Blackwatch Legion for no real gain. We also have plenty of Angmar Marauders in behind. Angmar do have a tendency to go for a little bit more of a quality focus. It's rarer that you see them go for the full numbers approach that you more often see, certainly from the Misty Mountains, but also from Mordor, but it looks as though Mevin has decided to go this route this time. FORNOST is a fairly big settlement after all, so having the ability to send multiple units of fairly high numbers infantry to many different portions of this settlement is going to be useful for the attackers. Many units of Angmar Marauders will be attempting to do that. A couple of units of the Trolls of Angmar as well, who also have their numbers boosted a little bit. Trolls in general seem to be a very potent weapon in this new version of the game, which is perhaps a little bit more understandable. I think in the previous version, Trolls, while they did have that damage spike and they were dangerous, ultimately they weren't a particularly feared unit, I don't think, because there were very clear counters to them. And even if you didn't have those direct counters on station, the Trolls would still fall away after a while. But in particular now, with these more heavily armoured Trolls, they can be a real problem if you allow them to really build momentum. So you definitely need to take them seriously. And the defenders are going to need their high damage units ready to try and burn them down quickly. Gundabad Guard represent a unit of mid-tier spears with decent defensive values. Their stolen dwarven equipment providing that, of course. And Angmar in general well known for the good defensive values on their heavy units, and they have this aggression through superior defence, really, that they often traffic in. We also have the Guardians of Khan Doom with their armour upgrades over here in jet black rather than rusted, and they represent this line of thought really perfectly, because they are really a technically mid to upper tier infantry unit as far as line infantry goes, but their offensive stats do lag a little bit behind even their fellow Orcish factions with stuff like the Uruk-hai infantry. However, their defensive values, in particular with those big shields, mean they can sustain themselves for longer in a battlefield, and it means Angmar have a tendency to just not go away, and that is certainly not really going to change in this new version of the game. Angmar already had a very distinctive focus to them, of course. Several units of Angmar Halberds as well to go with the several units of Angmar Marauders, very much the same sort of thing. The Phalanx does mean they can punch above their weight, potentially, against certain kinds of units, especially with that armour piercing. but the stats are very low. They're obviously defensively very deficient as well, so if the defenders are doing things properly, they shouldn't represent a huge problem on their own, but of course, combined with the rest of the fairly numerous army we see before you, that can be a fairly intimidating sight. More Guardians of Cardolan, and then the 2 bodyguard tier units at the back. The Witcher on Blackguard, the more defensive one, a little bit more able to keep themselves alive, of course, and then the very dangerous armor-piercing ones in the Hammer Guard, armor upgraded as they are as well, so very different approaches that can be had there. Expensive, but we shall see if that proves to be worthwhile. The conquered Arnorian kingdom of Rhudaur also marching with their overlords today. Rhudaur swordsmen going to be heading towards the walls, initially with ladders, siege towers and rams. Individually, of course, not terribly impressive, but very numerous. And they will at least offer a little bit more in melee than the likes of the Angmar Marauders or Heavy Goblin Infantry will. But don't expect the world of them, especially when they're going up against factions that are a little bit more well outfitted defensively. Really the numbers are what sets them apart, and then support from other factions and other units are going to be very necessary. The Rhudaur clansmen, though, with big shields and especially with the chainmail that they are donning here, their defensive values are actually pretty damn good. They're going to be a little bit more difficult to get rid of, but having said that, they're still not going to be of the same sort of level as the Angmarim that are marching alongside them. Rhudaur definitely offering a little bit more in terms of aggressive units perhaps, many of which will probably be hidden, albeit the Cardolan pikemen here do represent a unit which is really very, very good at offering an anchor. It used to be that having a shielded pike like this was a real rarity. There was only like 2 or 3 in the game. Now I think there's about 5 or 6, so it's not as if the Cardolan pikemen stand as a particularly unique unit in that regard any longer, but that doesn't make it any less of a useful tool, especially given the archer focus of Arthedain in particular. We've got the Etenmall's Troll Hunters back here, ever an important unit for Rhudaur. They pack on a little bit more armour than the lower tier units, and of course they have that very, very nasty armour-piercing projectile, which again going to be useful against their heavily armoured brethren from the west and south. And then some Witcher Arm Enslavers here, about 2 units of them, so going into the red limit on these guys. I mean, again, the armour-piercing is very tempting, I suppose, but can the attackers really afford to go into the red limit? I suppose so. It's a 4v4. But yeah, there could be some hidden units as well. I'd be surprised not to see Trollshore Axe Throwers, even with the meta of the game changing somewhat. Axe Throwers are still very, very nice in a situation like this. Cannon Fodder, playing as a second Angmarim army, another Troll Catapult, many more Angmar Marauders and Halberds as well. So nice to see a more numerous Angmar army compared to what we usually see, I suppose. Again, saving a little bit of money, and it does offer them more numbers to try and swarm over the fairly labyrinthine streets in behind the walls. More Trolls of Angmar, we have more Gundabad Guard, 3 units of them in fact. So going for a 3rd Spear unit rather than dipping heavily into the Guardians of Cardolan. Blackwatch Legion, we have the 2 bodyguard units once again, but where this army differs is they have also brought pikes. Upgraded Witcher Arm pikemen, they don't have the shields of the Cardolan, but they do have better armour, especially when it's upgraded like this, and they offer, again, another effective anchor point to the attacking force. If they get themselves set, the attackers could be onto a winner here with the damage, and to be fair, Angmar and Rhudaur do offset one another very, very nicely. And then we also have some Witcher Arm Scourge Raiders, now a mounted unit, of course, as we have seen in a few of these preview battles before. A mounted throwing axe unit gives them a little bit more mobility, and perhaps in those transitional phases where the attackers can often open up a bit of a lead, they could be very, very useful. And finally, the last attacking army, we have Froggy, playing as another Angmarim force, more Gundabad Guard, more of those upgraded Witcher Arm pikemen, both of the bodyguard tier units as well. So there's no shortage of bodyguard units on display today, especially those very high-end armour-piercing ones, very, very dangerous at the high end. All of these guys, more Guardians of Cardolan, more Gundabad Guard, more Angmar Marauders and Halberds, padding out Froggy's army with a little bit more numbers. And then we have some Troll Catapults, and again, Trolls of Angmar, Witcher Arm pikemen, and 2 units of Blackwatch Legion, so more mass pushing. Plenty of mass. I mean, a scary force. Angmar and Rhudaur always were in the last version of the game, and that's not terribly different now. Let's see then what the defenders of FORNOST have in store for them. We have Adin Men playing as one of the Arthedainian armies. Arthedain, always well known for having a decent infantry force, but a little bit more of an emphasis for them placed on the support, in particular their archers, of course. The high tier Dunedain units will be very, very important, especially against the lightly armoured units, which simply won't be able to withstand them. We have the Arthedain pikemen, who have been given a little bit of a makeover. They've got a better helmet than they used to. Very important here as well for them to be able to hold the lines. I mean, we've seen the strong pikes that the attackers have today, But pikes for the defenders here are going to be invaluable at clogging up these city streets, and the Abendym Spearmen do represent a good unit to simply stand in front of them and take some of the damage. I'll be interested to see how the Arthedain Men-at-Arms gets on in this kind of battle, because this kind of unit, of course, in the previous version of the game struggled a little bit, but the main buff that units like this have received, as we've seen already with Gondor in a previous patch preview, is the fact that their numbers have been increased now. So they will be able to go toe-to-toe with those more numerous units, because they are one of those more numerous units now. And of course, with their superior equipment, they should be able to go and defeat stuff like, in particular, Rhudaur swordsmen fairly easily with their better defensive values, but may still be a bridge too far to go after some of the stronger units like Guardians of Cardolan on their own anyway. But still, the numbers will be very, very helpful. Very important unit will be the Dunedain Troll Slayers here, the Javelins, certainly not just the preserve of Rhudaur when it comes to the Arnorians. Very, very powerful unit this. Armour piercing, range and melee attacks. Very good. In particular against the dangerous force that is Angmar. Dunedain Rangers. Rangers, of course, very different now. It used to be that Arthedain lent quite heavily on their body-piercing projectiles. They are one of the few factions in the game that still has access to a body-piercing archer, albeit on horseback, I believe. We'll see if the Grey Company are present. But the Dunedain Rangers themselves are still a very damaging unit, and that base damage is going to be important, and choice of target is going to be key here if they can go after stuff like the Hammer Guard. That would probably be for the best. Over here we have a trebuchet of Numenor. Interesting indeed. The trebuchets have always been a very dangerous artillery piece. Positioning is going to be everything. This is a unit I believe we've already seen in a Numenorian preview, if I'm not mistaken. The name escapes me for now, but maybe we'll see them separate of their trebuchet, unless they are a unique unit. I truly can't remember for the life of me, but I'm sure we've seen them before. But anyway, armed with hammers, so they're going to offer an armour piercing and melee option for Arthedain, which they kind of lacked for a while. Armour piercing at range, however, is not something they've lacked. We've seen the Troll Slayers. Here are the Wardens of the North, steel bows, very strong in melee as well with a two-handed sword, so they will be ever present as well. More pikes and Abendym Spearmen and more Arthedain Men-at-Arms also. Another unit of Rangers up here too, and more Dunedain Rangers. I mean, there's plenty of Dunedain Rangers. Sin also on the defence. We have 2 times playing as Cardolan as well. Nice to see the new models for Cardolan as well. They've been brought kind of more into line once again with their Arnorian heritage, especially with some of these higher end units. They did have that before, of course, but now they've just been made a little bit higher def, and it's nice to see that. Cardolan archers, so they're obviously a little bit more bulky. Skirmishing archer. Arthedain Men-at-Arms, Arthedain Pikemen, as we've seen before. Nice defensive blocks of units this, line infantry and pikes, classic. We have the Cardolan Men-at-Arms as well, unsurprisingly, with the same new look as well. I really like this new look for Cardolan as well. It completes them a little bit, I think. Certainly with regards to their higher tier units, anyway. And just in behind we have the Greenway Footmen as well. So this, of course, we've seen this look before in the Tharbad units. Now it's been applied a little bit more generally. So a basic unit of pikes this, once again, going to be just as important for Cardolan as they will be for Arthedain here. Number of pikes is important as well. Tharbad Warhammers, we've seen them before, of course, the equivalent to many of the attacking units today with the Hammer Guard and the Enslavers on the attack. Very nice new look for them as well. Could be really devastating against the high tier units for Angmar as well. Certainly Cardolan will be hoping that's the case. The Cardolan Sharpshooters, combination of macemen in melee and crossbows at range, ever the very useful multifaceted unit this. The armour piercing, once again, and the sheer stopping power that crossbows offer. We have another trebuchet of Numenor once again, with the same unit, albeit this time clad in the green of Cardolan, rather than the darker garb of Arthedain. We have some ruffians, of course previously known as the bandits, simple javelins. We have the defenders of FORNOST, fighting on home turf today. Of course still the same sort of thing, still a reasonably high tier unit of heavy swordsmen, defending their own city today. And we have some Arthedain Men-at-Arms guarding the way back into the settlement over here. Dunedain Rangers, more Cardolan archers, more Wardens of the North over here as well. The Arthedain Marksmen and Men-at-Arms and Pikes over here. Defenders of FORNOST offering a little bit more quality. This Eclipse 2500, who of course sent me this replay, albeit we're not watching it from his perspective today. Guardians of the Scepter, a new unit for Arthedain this, of course, with a high-end unit of sword and board infantry. Interesting to see how they get on. Arthedain Pikemen, Arthedain Men-at-Arms, more marksmen, more rank and file units. But as we make our way back into the final stand over here, we've got more pikes gathered around this statue over here. We've got more sharpshooters. We still have the Hearthguard of Amon-Sul as the high tier, very heavily armoured Cardolan archer with more men-at-arms. Warns of Tirn Gorthad are still here as the higher tier option for Cardolan pikes. Another trebuchet, plenty of artillery for the defenders, as well as more troll slayers. We do have the gatekeepers, the higher tier crossbow 2, Arthedain men-at-arms, more guardians of the scepter. We've got the Illuminous Gate Guards for a unit of high tier crossbows, or pikes I should say, for the Arthedainians. We've got the guardians of the scepter, and we do have the Grey Company for Sin here, so they can still lean a little bit on those body-piercing projectiles, though not as much as they would have been able to do, but it's still going to be a very useful tool here as the attackers attempt to make their way through FORNOST. But I'll make a little bit of a cut. I can't imagine it'll be too long. However, the attacking armies are right there, and we'll rejoin when the first blows are being struck. So I think we may as well rejoin here, considering the fact that the walls are being bombarded, although it does seem like they're going to take a little while to get through, considering direct hits of a few volleys has only resulted in 18% damage so far, which I suppose makes sense when you consider the scale of these walls. But the Rhudaur forces are actually the ones that are going to be moving forward into the direct line of sight for now, and we're also going to start to see these attacks from the archers on the side, the Cardolan archers over on this side, and I believe, yes, the same over on the other as well. This is something that we've seen a little bit more so lately with these walls that extend outwards, so you can start to shoot into the side of attacking forces as they move forward, which, especially considering mechanically how Medieval 2 archers tend to work up on walls like this, does really help you get some better shots, and also it does also help take away from the effectiveness of some of these shielded units for the attackers, considering those shields are really the only thing giving these Rhudaur swordsmen any sort of rigidity against the arrow's onslaught. Towers also moving forward. So Angmar are going to be able to attack both other sides. I mean, really, cannon fodder here represents more of an additional army. I would suggest the vast majority of which should probably be giving Rhudaur a little bit of support, considering Rhudaur aren't really built for this sort of warfare in the same capacity that Angmar are. You can see that it hasn't really lasted all that long, this period of time where the Cardolan archers have been able to shoot into the sides of these units. No infantry up here to be able to meet the challenge of the already onrushing Rhudaur swordsmen and Angmar orcs. The projectiles flying through the air. There's going to be so many siege towers and potentially crumbling sections of wall here that this is going to be one of those situations, I think, where the announcer isn't going to know when to shut up. Navan also going to smash through here, taking a while though, and quite a lot of ammunition being utilised already by the attacking siege. They do have the upside of their crew being trolls, so they will have that utility throughout the battle. But the settlement already being placed under threat with these Rhudaur swordsmen. Cardolan men-at-arms moving into position. You can see here that the doesn't quite line up with the door there, but you get the basic idea. So Cardolan men-at-arms going to be here blocking the way. Unidine Rangers are also there. They should probably think about moving a little bit. They're very stretched out. As much as they will be useful up here at shooting into the attackers as they try to make their way through the gate, I think what the attackers are going to try to do is contest the higher section of the wall first. You can see here Angmar Marauders, the first melee engagement beginning between the Marauders and the Cardolan men-at-arms, but this is an engagement where the Cardolan men-at-arms in theory should shine. Angmar Marauders individually don't have that quality, and the defensive attributes of the Cardolan unit should do a fair amount of heavy lifting. See here the gates do go down. Trying to push through, maybe try and do that pseudo pushing thing with a bit of siege equipment, but with ladders. It didn't really work because they instantly dropped the ladders in the face of the defensive line. A combination of the Arthedain men-at-arms and pikes will be just fine against only Rhudaur swordsmen for the time being. Flaming shots also arcing through the air. Many of those arrows, however, not hitting their target. In fact, very few of them are. And then the crumbled section of wall also, the Rhudaur clansmen starting to move through here. There are plenty of routes that the attackers can take, however. In a 4v4, that's not the end of the world for the defenders, but it is still something they're going to have to be aware of, that they're going to have to defend both of these sections of wall. They're going to have to defend the gate and the gap in the wall that the attackers have already made, and as if that wasn't enough, these flanks are also being immediately pressurised by some of these heavy troll units, which we've already mentioned. Trolls are a little bit more scary in this new version of the game, and perhaps that is why they're immediately garnering the attention of some Wardens of the North to try and do a little bit of extra damage to them. Angmar Marauders, Guardians of Cardolan pushing forward as well, so Mevin coming forward with a fair amount of force here. The defenders of FORNOST will do really well against a lot of these basic orcs in particular, but are there going to be enough of them to withstand this? I think the savagery of Mevin's assault here has maybe caught Arthedain a little bit flat-footed, because they're looking a little bit splintered. This could yet turn into Arthedain's favour if Angmar start to rout with some of their weaker units, but for the time being at least, Angmar will be pretty pleased with how the initial part of this engagement has gone. Meanwhile over here, lagging behind a little bit Froggy. Adinmen's Arthedain army still awaiting the initial ranks of the enemy. Flaming shot now starting to hit the forces coming through the gates. Well, yeah, Cardolan men-at-arms doing a good job here. Some of them actually extending down into this section of the wall. Yeah, and the Angmar Marauders. There are quite a lot of them, however. You don't want to chase the enemy too far, as much as these units should have the beating of these orcs. Numbers are, of course, still something that ultimately are going to be working in favour of the attackers today. Granadine Pikeman defeat is almost a certainty. The support of those flaming arrows, as well as the rigidity of this Arthedain front line, is doing a good job at holding onto the gate initially. There's a little bit of friendly fire going on. Greenway footmen, some of the units coming down from on top of the walls, but not enough of them. And these Rhudaur swordsmen aren't going to get very far. Maybe we'll see a bit of routing over here as well. Only one unit of Rhudaur clansmen too. They're going to need to send forward a little bit extra. I wonder how much of Cannon Fodder's army is going to be committed over here. More Rhudaur units, including the Blackwolds. The Blackwolds, of course, should be pretty good against a lot of these armoured units against which they're facing. There's trolls crunching through those Arthedain men-at-arms, and the defenders of FORNOST, of course. And it is still true that against trolls you're going to want something with higher attack value, so the defenders of FORNOST are among one of the better units you could commit against the trolls. Excuse me. But not in enough numbers so far. Again, trying to make a bit of a statement to reclaim a little bit of solidity over here, Arthedain, by committing some Guardians of the Scepter forwards. Again, that level of quality is all well and good, but Angmar are going to reciprocate by also having some Hammer Guard on station. Of course, with those compositions that we saw, they're not exactly going to be hurting for high-end arm-piercing troops. Arthedain marksmen have got a decent shot down this way. Provided they're in range, I think they should probably just start opening up and trying to at least bloody this Angmar army a little bit more so than they've been able to do so far. Arthedain men-at-arms are also on station to offer a little bit of reinforcing, but Dunyaline Rangers as well. Again, this is another one of those battles where we're not really going to be able to easily see how much damage the defending skirmishers are truly doing. Cardolan sharpshooters are fairly close, but they're also in full view of Cannon Fodder's catapults, so they're going to need to get out of there. I mean, they can try and hold their ground and they can do a decent amount of damage from where they are, but they're going to get themselves surely killed as well. I mean, that is a fairly easy shot for the catapult to make. As soon as I say that, of course, the catapult completely fails to hit them. More of the trolls as well, a lot of trolls now moving forward. Of course, we did see Cardolan wheel forward some of their own pikes and line infantry to help reinforce, but neither of those two classes of unit are going to do so well against these trolls, although crossbow support maybe, provided those projectiles actually hit the large unit models of the trolls. They should do a decent job. Rhudaur pikemen still alive. They've been under a lot of pressure so far in this battle, but still trucking on. Meanwhile, over on this side of things, Angmar being given a little bit more free rein to go a little bit further into the settlement, in all fairness. Although over here, Arthedain having to try and put up some resistance to them, but Froggy blasting through with Blackwatch Legion and Trolls of Angmar. So as if to make up for lost time, all of the high mass units are now moving forward. And of course, when you've got a mass pushing unit like this, and you've got a fairly exposed trebuchet in behind a fairly thin front line, it's only going to end one way. I suppose the saving grace here is that the trebuchet crew, being that armour-piercing infantry unit, certainly against the Blackwatch Legion they should trade quite well, although the trolls, as we've already mentioned, scary enough to the point where the trebuchet crew still going to be in a lot of trouble, and Arthedain may unfortunately be losing his artillery here as a result of maybe getting a little bit too comfortable. But Angmar, as they are wont to do, coming forward with a lot of aggression, and it has yielded results very, very quickly. Rhudaur Rangers in close support. I mean, they will be doing a lot of damage. Whether that's going to be enough to make up for the loss that they're inevitably going to sustain here. And they're going to need to stop this Angmar push, because otherwise they're just going to be able to continue. The fact that there is another... Excuse me, I think my voice may be disappearing. But as considering there is another gate just in behind, that is a kind of natural stopper on the momentum that Angmar are going to be able to enjoy here. But if they can secure this position, they could even move forwards to try and give a little bit of support to the forces down here, and they may actually need to think about retreating here, because this is starting to go a little bit sour for the defenders fairly quickly. Blackwold starting to push forwards and managing to engage with Dunedain Rangers up on the walls. The addition of those trolls on the front line over here, as well as some fresh units from both Rhudaur and Angmar, Gundabad Guard and Blackwold in particular stand out, means that that initial front line has collapsed pretty quickly. Whether it's going to have been enough damage that they've inflicted, we'll have to just wait and see for the late game. The Greenway Footmen still fighting, but they are really the only defending infantry unit that are still doing that over here. Troll Hunters, are they going to be able to retreat quickly enough? Not really. The Ruffians, well, yeah, they are going to be able to get away quickly enough, in fact. They may have to leave a rear guard, however. I mean, the Tharbad Warhammers are a hell of a rear guard to leave. You would think that they would want those units for later on, but I suppose their mere presence on the front line will do a lot of damage as well. Rhudaur clansmen are not going to trade too effectively with them, nor the Gundabad Guard. Blackwold's going to block the Dunedain Rangers from further retreat as well. Sin, I think this is going to be the end for his Rangers, although actually he's managed to give those Blackwolds the slip. There's a lot going on, so WK clearly wasn't looking at that, but Dunedain Rangers will be able to attack a unit like this Gundabad Guard from the rear now, maybe get a little bit of a rout going on for them. Those Dunedain Rangers, what are they doing? If they manage to get away from this position, then it's going to be crazy. Troll short axe throwers, are they in a good enough position to shoot? I mean, Tharbad Warhammers represent probably the very best unit that the defenders have to try and bring down trolls, and we've already seen the power of these trolls so far in this battle. Arrows raining down from on high. Having a look back over here, yeah, really it's just a case of trying to secure this position now, although Froggy may well have blasted through pretty quickly, but that does mean there were quite a lot of stragglers in behind, and I mean, stuff like Dunedain Troll Slayers, now's the chance for them to really prove that they deserve that title. Try and bring down yet more of these Trolls of Angmar. And there's a fair amount of these units as well which have managed to collapse back in on these units. I think the Trebuchet crew is completely gone, but it has cost Angmar that. They have had to lose sections of their army as a result. FORNOST units, Dunedain Rangers firing directly into the Witchram Hammer Guard, so again it's a little bit chaotic. In this sort of situation, you always think that the attackers are really doing some significant lifting in these phases of the battle, but little things like that will give the defenders some hope. Unsurprisingly, Cardolan archers routing, finding themselves surrounded by hammer guard and trolls. Cardolan, of course, morale is what it is. Meanwhile, these trolls of Angmar still doing the business. They do have a lot of support, in all fairness. Much as the Tharbad Warhammers individually are the ideal thing, they didn't really have the numbers backing them up in the same way that the trolls did, and momentum is key here, and the defenders probably haven't done what is necessary to really stifle Angmar's momentum. They needed to either go completely all in, I think, to completely roadblock Angmar with their Rhudaur support, or retreat a little bit sooner and form up a more significant front line back here than they have done. We'll see. Still a long way in this battle to go, and like I said, it's not as if the attackers have been able to get away with this scot-free, although I will say that the loss of 2 trebuchets before they've really been able to do anything is very unfortunate for the defenders. Trebuchets, of course, can be exceptionally damaging, and especially in late game choke points where the attackers probably won't really have any answer to them, the level of punishment they can dish out could have been absolutely vital, but as it is, not so much. I have to say, I mean, trolls are so powerful in this version of the game, I'm a little bit concerned. I mean, the trolls of Angmar are starting to fall away now, but I think perhaps some more stringent limits on the amount you're able to bring might be in order. I mean, even if the defenders do go on to win this, I've seen enough battles in the past now on this new test version of the game where trolls are so central to what the orcs now do. We'll see. Maybe I'm worrying about nothing, but it's the sort of thing I can imagine coming up in the comments a lot as well. Troll Caswell trying to go through the gates directly. I mean, the rams coming up now, they're using the ammunition, maybe a little bit unnecessarily, but it does, of course, get them through this position even more quickly. Those are Tharbad Warhammers, actually, which are now running. Actually, no, that's the Trebuchet of Numenor. It's interesting that these Arthedainian units are still fighting, actually. Arthedain Man-at-Arms. There are still some Tharbad Warhammers in here, albeit only 14 of them. In all fairness, the infantry support has been ground down, so that's something that the defenders can take great pride in. And it's not as if there's a huge amount of units left over here. Guardians of Khan Doom now moving forward. So as we've already mentioned, it has been a bloody affair for the attackers, but nonetheless, forward motion has been fairly consistently achieved. What have we here? Again, more trolls. Trolls look so silly when they're climbing up siege equipment like this. Ladders or siege towers. I mean, this engagement is only going to end one way. Arthedain Man-at-Arms simply won't have the damage to be able to deal with those trolls, even if they are bloodied from earlier engagements. The rank and file will not be enough. And these feel a little bit more like token efforts of defences. They have got a lot of reinforcements, but I imagine we're going to see a sort of staggered retreat here from Eclipse. I don't know if you can run along the length of these walls over here and use these overhead walkways as shooting positions. If you can, and the attackers still have any archers left, they should be thinking about doing so, though of course that will have to be pretty much the realm of Rhudaur only, and Mars archer force being what it is. Crossbow bolts raining down. Again, the trolls are here, which I'm enslavers make for another good target for the crossbows as well, in all fairness. The ram may be getting in the way of many of those hits from them. One of the rare occasions perhaps where the ram's canopy is actually doing its job. And pikemen as well. What will the attackers do from here? It does look as though there's a period of slowdown here in this battle now. Scourge Raiders. Dunedain Rangers still firing away. As is still very much the case, it's this kind of damage dealing unit which is going to be so vital to the defenders' chances. What are they actually hitting? Not a great deal by the looks of things, very weird. Ones of the North. The intended target, I think, for a lot of those throwing axes, though the angle isn't exactly on their side. Blackwatch Legion pushing up a ram as well. That's again a second unit of Blackwatch Legion. We saw how effective they could be earlier on. Again, a single unit of Blackwatch Legion with troll supports. And there are Dunedain class units in here, but is this a substantial enough front line? The question has to be asked. Further down here, Cardolan's Rangers. Trying to thread the needle with their own artillery now. I mean, they may as well try and use it, I suppose. The other trebuchets not really being able to do anything of note in this battle. This unit of crossbows, meanwhile, has been given free rein to largely shoot as they please. Well, yeah, unsurprisingly, I think Eclipse has decided to pull back entirely. I have to say, I mean, the Guardians of the Scepter are... they're kind of a new unit, but they fill the exact same role, I think, as the Dismounted Knights of Illuminus. I don't know how I feel about one of the OG units being replaced. At least the Dismounted Knights of Illuminus. I assume the mounted version's still very much with us, but still. More crossbows. One thing that I'm definitely not in doubt about, however, is the upgrade that the standard Cardolan units have got visually. As Witch Elven Slavers still very much there. What was that? Oh, Trollcast. I thought that was friendly fire for a second then. From the defending trebuchet, and I was like, as if the trebuchets couldn't embarrass themselves anymore. Fighting for the walls as well. One troll remains, Arthedain Man-at-Arms. What remains of the Dunedain Rangers up here as well. I mean, the pikes on the wall can seem a little bit peculiar. If they get set, however, they can actually be extremely effective. It's that initial point where they have their formation compromised that things can get a little bit messy, but the Witch-Run Pikemen seem to be doing a decent enough job of this so far. Blackwatch Legion trying to force their way through. Yeah, I was worried that this front line didn't look substantial enough. I mean, it may have been several ranks deep, but none of these units were particularly high-end. None of them were able to do the damage quickly enough to the Blackwatch Legion. They may not be able to do tons and tons of damage in melee, but they are sturdy enough in comparison to the Mordor equivalent that you do need something with some decent offensive stats to do the business against them. Ones in the north, with their projectiles, may be able to accomplish this, but plenty of numbers also rolling through in support of the Blackwatch. They don't have any infantry reinforcements close by either, so this is all the defenders are going to get over here. Forward come the halberds as well. If these Dunedain Rangers were Dunedain Troll Slayers, things may be a little different, but as it is, also the fact that one of those trolls is still alive is a sign that those Troll Slayers most certainly did not live up to their name. If any of them survived that encounter, and the Troll Slayers certainly didn't seem to. Gundabad Guard moving forward as the vanguard here. Not many of them remaining. Taking a lot of damage earlier on during the securing of the first layer of FORNOST. Again, there are these trolls. More trolls, and again, there's not really A lot of these units that have been committed thus far are just not of the level required when it comes to dealing damage, but then this is something which both Cardolan and Arthedain suffer from a little bit in their rosters, and always have done really. They do have a few armour piercing options, they do have a few shock infantry options, but nothing super obvious that would be good at dealing with this kind of unit. I mean, the hope is that surely at this point the trolls have been in combat enough to the point where it shouldn't take too much more to lay them low. We'll have to wait and see on that. There is a fight going on over here as well. Once again, the trolls at the heart of everything. Guardians of the Scepter fighting in close melee as well. I mean, the good thing over here is that Eclipse does have a substantial enough force around his main units to be able to block Angmar's further progress. Nevin defeats him certainly. A lot of these basic units as well are really not going to enjoy going up against the Arthedainian troops, and of course the Orcs do need those numbers around some of their more impressive units if they are to be victorious. Troll Catapult is here. I mean, the Troll Catapult could be absolutely devastating if it still has ammunition. There's really nothing Arthedain would be able to do about that particular situation. But we'll keep an eye on this as that situation develops. They do still have plenty of reinforcements here. They did retreat at the right times, I would suggest, the defenders, so that does give them a little bit more wiggle room here as the battle enters its latter stages. There's nowhere further they can really retreat to. They do still have the Grey Company, which can be relied upon for a lot of damage. Those body-piercing projectiles, a little bit of a throwback at this point. And projectiles still represent their best hope. Cannon Fodder and Froggy, meanwhile, unsurprisingly blasting through this defensive position, and this one has gone significantly poorer for the defenders than the one on the other side. Not a huge amount to be done there. There's still the Wardens of the North over here, in all fairness. But the only hope they have really is the fact that the attackers don't notice the Wardens of the North are here and undercommit to them and feed as many kills as possible into them. Other than that, not really sure it's going to go their way. I mean, they are actually split between both sides. They're primarily over here. Bit of a weird situation there. But there we have it. Still the fight for the walls going on as well, but the Witcher Blackguard finally putting an end to this nonsense. Witcher Pikeman damaged but victorious. Not really committing to the walls. You can see here damage being done. Was that friendly fire? Something that we missed? I don't think so. The Troll Catapult is just on the other side. We'll give the trebuchets the benefit of the doubt and suggest that they didn't inflict friendly fire. Oh, actually, considering their firing, maybe we shouldn't. Again, you have to thread the needle a bit with the trebuchet, though. This is a risky shot. I suppose the prize, if you are able to do so, is almost a guaranteed rout of some of these units, but yeah, the risk does pay off in the end, and getting rid of these pikemen will also be much appreciated, I'm sure. They're going to take damage by doing this, but once again, this front line a little bit thin, and reinforcements not directly here. Guardians of Cardolan rushing to engage these Dunedain Rangers in melee. Making our way over this internal moat then. What is Eclipse's fate? That Troll Catapult still not being utilised fully. The Troll's still standing. Some of them not even bloodied, which is a little bit concerning. Defeat is a distinct possibility for the Arthedainians now. 37 Guardians of the Scepter remain. I mean, they should be able to easily beat Angmar Marauders and Angmar Halberds. They are more of a defensive unit though. Maybe not the best against the Trolls, but there are defenders of FORNOST in here. the damage spike that they offer should be enough. They are starting to fall away as well, the trolls. This one in behind enemy lines. They're going to need a little bit more, I think, here, Mavin. He does have more. Gundabad Guard and Guardians of Cardolan. Blackwatch Legion could be committed later when this position is whittled down a little bit more, but the line is still thick enough to the point where that's probably not. It's probably not the time for that. Meanwhile, forward momentum still being enjoyed by the attackers, but as they move forward, ruffians hitting them, path guard. The trebuchet will get a clearer shot now as well. That the target area is bigger. Combination of Dunedain Troll Slayers and Wardens of Tirn Gorthad as well, forming up a pretty effective front line. How much more do the attackers have left to give here in the middle, however? I think they still have more in terms of reinforcements out on the two flanks, whereas here, there are Witchers. Interesting to see how effective they can be in this new version of the game. Ever the fan favourite that they are. And now moving forward, Scourge Raiders in the vanguard, but again, pikes and infantry ready to meet the advance. So far, it's kind of hard to tell where this one is going. It's dead even, 70% to 70%. 4v4 as well, so based on that, you would imagine a little bit of extra quality for the attackers. So maybe we can say that, especially considering the momentum they've had in this fight, that they hold a slight edge, but this battle is on a knife's edge. Tram Pikemen moving forward now as well, trying to solidify the position that the attackers are in here. Arthedain Men-at-Arms pushing forwards. I mean, they will be able to get into melee with what's left of these troll shores as well, which should be enough to finish them off. Ruffians. Can't imagine they're going to be up to much in melee, especially not against some of the heavier Angmar units. There's still clusters of trolls like this. They always look so goofy when they're up on the walls. They densely pack themselves in the way that normal infantry does. You know, these Dunedain Rangers are going to be squashed underfoot, but it's not really the worst thing in the world for the defenders. If anything, it's taken a little bit of the heat off this front line over here for them to reposition themselves. Ones of Tirn Gorthad have got a little bit of a visual change to them as well, by the looks of things. Arthedain Men-at-Arms continuing to push forward. I mean, victory seems certain. A fair amount of these units over here maybe not of the required level. The real question is when that Grey Company is going to move forward, when the Witches are going to move forward for the attacks as well. Really the very best that both sides have to offer still has yet to be fully committed. The Trolls have finally all been killed over here. Guardians of the Scepter still standing, but now the Witcher and Blackguard, who are fresher, have moved forward. There is an inevitability to Angmar winning this engagement over here, but Arthedain have held out for quite a while, and they will be able to kill off quite a lot of the entry-level Angmar units as well, so it may very well prove to be worthwhile in the end, though we'll only have the true litmus test for that when the battle has reached its conclusion. This fight over here, meanwhile, is a real cluster. Cardolan sharpshooters. I don't know what sort of angle they're getting. Dunedain Troll Slayers still there. There's a bit of routing going on from some of the more depleted Arthedainian infantry units. Some of these units looking like they could rout. Of course, morale boosting effects on units should be active now, though I don't know if the ones that the Wardens of Tirn Gorthad have apply to only the Cardolan units or to all of their team's units. Cardolan probably need a little bit more if the Ruffians are going to stay in combat for any significant length of time. Dunedain Troll Slayers being engaged in melee. Gundabad Guard won't like that engagement at all, but at this point it's more just a case of trying to flood forward still, try and maintain what you have going here. Well, this unit of Arthedain marksmen being sent forward as a bit of an advanced force, maybe give the missile units in behind just that extra time to try and do as much damage to Angmar as possible as they move forwards. Guardians. Still the small matter of the attacking catapults as well. More Guardians of the Scepter, Numinas Gate Guards as well, high-end pikes. In order to maintain their momentum, the attackers have, after all, had to commit pretty much everything they've had. They haven't been able to be picky with what they've been sending forward. They haven't been able to hold much back in reserve, and that was nearly the cause of the defenders being able to win last time, though it wasn't quite enough in the end for Dorwinion there. Will it be enough for the Arnorians here? Defending Trebuchet still very much alive. Still Trolls very much alive though, in conjunction with these heavy Angmar troops. And this is the sort of thing that Angmar should be good at, after all. They have Plan A, and if Plan A doesn't work the first time, they simply try Plan A again. As a faction. Full aggression. Ooh dear. They blew through that area pretty quickly. I can only assume the Hammer Guard were a big part of that, and the Blackwatch Legion in conjunction with one another. So what was a pretty good engagement for Eclipse over there seemed to turn sour pretty fast. I mean, the issue they have now, of course, is... well, there are the Grey Company. The Grey Company, not only are they body piercing, of course, but they're also a very manoeuvrable unit. This guy. To shoot into that blob over there. Defenders of FORNOST blocking the advance of these Guardians of Cardolan. Not enough of them any longer to be able to push through. Angmar trying to burrow in and maybe go after the Grey Company, or try and box them in even further. Another depleted unit of Guardians of Cardolan, albeit this one against Arthedain marksmen probably will be victorious. The unrelenting march continues. That's unfortunate as well. I have to say, the Trebuchet, we've seen at least Sins score some good hits, but the defending artillery has not been up to the kind of standards that it really needs to be in a battle like this, especially if you're going to bring so many of them. Trebuchets are expensive. Flushing that much money down the toilet is unwise, to say the least. The Numinas Gate Guards, meanwhile, are holding this Angmar flank at bay for the time being, at least. Halberds. They don't really have much in the way of reinforcements left over here, at the very least. They can throw everything in, and they may as well at this point. It's a case of if you can find some gaps as the attackers, may as well try and take advantage of them. Try and turn it into a chaotic brawl, and if you can, stuff like your Hammer Guard and Blackguard and your numbers should be enough to see you over the line. The Grey Company, meanwhile, firing in. I don't really know where the Witches have gone. We have lost track of them, which is a surefire sign to get yourselves killed. Oh no, they're still way back over here. Still enjoying the company of a couple of more Trolls. Defeat seems certain for the Blackwatch Legion. I mean, sustained melee is not really their best position. Body-piercing projectiles, meanwhile, ripping through both them and the Witcher pikemen over here. Oof. The attacking artillery has been more effective in this battle overall, I would say, putting pressure on the defenders, crumbling walls. Maybe it's easier to meet standards for attacking artillery. You don't expect the world of them, after all. Ruffians, meanwhile, forming up the vast majority of this front line, so worrying times, surely. Will FORNOST ever be resettled and rebuilt? I'm sure the Orcs probably would settle in its ruins, but they wouldn't rebuild it to former glories. Starting to form up a bit of a defence around the town centre. Still Mavin with a lot left in reserve, or enough left in reserve to be of real concern, you would say. I mean, artillery as well, to friendly fire is maybe a little bit of a risk for that Troll Catapult, hitting the back of your own man after all. especially where Angmar Marauders and Halberds are concerned, you're fairly likely to rout them off. As the Guardians of Cardolan roll forwards further. Cardolan sharpshooters, I mean, I don't think there's enough of them, but this is maybe where their use of a mace in melee could come in handy. I mean, they've chosen the one Rhudaur unit that will be useful against, I suspect. The 2 trolls move in. The catapult crews shouldn't be as robust as the trolls of Angmar we've seen throughout the battles so far. The Grey Company may have to be the ones to do the business here. Guardians of the Scepter moving forward, and as much as the troll catapult crews with their drums as well are not going to be the best in melee, they should still be pretty good at splintering a pike formation such as the one that Arthedain were relying upon over here to make this engagement continue to be fruitful. But with Blackguard and Hammerguard on their way over, it's looking pretty bleak. Having a look now, yeah, the defenders have started to slide a little bit here in the late game. Level of quality that the attackers were able to bring to the table just a little bit too much by the looks of things. And then Trebuchet of Numenor. A bit more armour piercing, but the defenders really have struggled, I think, to stifle the momentum. That, I mean, Angmar are probably the best faction in the game for doing this sort of thing, but when you consider the added strength that trolls now have, the Blackwatch Legion being used at good times, in all fairness, by the attackers, and there's nothing really that can be done about that if the attackers are paying attention. But it's hard. It is hard to deal with that sort of thing unless you can fully commit to a single defensive point. And we already mentioned earlier on in the fight how many routes there are through FORNOST, and covering them all does mean you have to fragment your army a little bit more, and that means if the attackers do concentration of force, it's going to be tough on you. Grey Company shooting into the front of these units. I mean, the shields on the Gundabad Guard will be mitigating a fair amount of the damage there. Guardians of the Scepter, just how strong are they? Still gatekeepers, still Wardens of the North. I mean, it's not as if these individual units that are left for the defenders are weak. It's just a case of whether or not they're truly going to be able to do damage quickly enough to turn this battle around in the final hour. Crossbows. Victory is a distinct possibility for the Guardians of Cardolan. They're right at the back. I'm surprised any of them are actually in melee proper at the moment. More trolls. Maybe the witches. They have moved forwards. I don't know where they are though. Ah, here we are. The Witchers were moving in to try and grill the front line, but the Grey Company did see them. I don't know if the Grey Company in sustained melee will be able to beat the Witchers, in all fairness. I mean, the Witchers, they're certainly nowhere near the Nazgul's level, but they still have several hit points individually. I'm going to try and cycle charge them to death. The Grey Company don't really have too much of an option here. The Grey Company can't really get too far away in order to deliver a bigger charge, I don't think, because if they do, the Witchers will have enough time to wind up for an actual shot on them. What is going on here? What is that? Bit of a graphical glitch there. Bit of a weird one. Starting to see the defending generals fall away as well. So I think we can be fairly confident that the attackers are going to win this one. Having a look. It was close throughout, but again, it was one of those where you just got a certain feeling of inevitability beyond a certain point that the attackers weren't going to be stopped. And again, I feel as though in certain situations you have to either completely retreat or completely commit to an engagement. Angmar kind of force you to do that with how heavy duty they are, and I think the defenders were caught between those two between those two extremes a little bit too much. And the results are here for all to see. The war in the north goes ill. Still witches alive. Will this battle end with a grilling of what remains of the Arthedainian units? I mean, the witches, I know for a fact, I think their projectiles have been made slightly thinner, so they're not quite the nuclear bomb of a unit that they were previously, but they are always going to be something of a controversial topic, I think. Troll catapult crew moving in. I mean, the gatekeepers, decent enough in melee, though damaged as they are. And as a polearm unit, trolls are not really their favourite unit to face. This is pretty much everything the attackers have left, condensed into fighting for the town centre now. It's not a huge amount when you consider how big Angmar and Rhudaur armies have a tendency to be. And I think pretty much everything from Rhudaur has fallen by the wayside. I think everything that's left is from Angmar. If there is anything left from Rhudaur, they are very, very small units indeed. The Grey Company. Only 5 remain. Players beginning to admit defeat. Still 20 again, like the armour piercing at the high end as well from stuff like the Hammer Guard. Always going to be difficult. The Orcish factions generally have some fairly scary stuff at the high end. They may lack a little bit of refinement, but the damage they're often capable of laying down is difficult to deal with when you combine it with the rest of the things they have going on in their favour. Numbers, which is not going to be able to get any shots off by the looks of things over here, but neither are they going to be killed. And what remains now, I think they will be bumping a lot of these units back into fighting, but it's just so that they can be slaughtered. What's going on here? 1 Grey Company. Probably the most interesting engagement left, to be fair. The General for Sin, finishing off what remains of these Witch Realm Scourge Raiders at the very least. I suppose you would back him to do so. The individual General model, after all, does have more HP. And there we go. So I guess we will follow the exploits of Sin's General. The last Lord of FORNOST. Is he going to charge in there? He's signalling to attack, but he doesn't have a unit anymore that signal would be useful for. Ooh. Are they going to be? Is he going to be grilled? No, he is going to get in there. Oh no, he is going to be grilled. Point blank. They actually, I think they cooked some of their own their own units there, the Witchers, but it was, I suppose it was worth it to bathe Sin's General in green fire. But that is going to be that. And there we have it. A good showcase again, I would suggest. Again, a close enough battle. Not quite as close as the Coruscant one, where I thought actually in that one Dorwinion would make a recovery towards the end, but in the end they weren't able to. On this occasion I didn't really expect the Arnorians to be able to recover when the battle for the final section really got underway, and in the end that did prove to be the case. Though it wouldn't have taken too much more, I don't think. Like I said, whether committing more to the very first defences or committing slightly less, that may have been the difference, but again, that's all ifs, ands, buts, maybes. You can't really be too sure in this sort of situation. Ultimately, the attackers did attack very well. They attacked in a very formulaic fashion, where they moved in, used their momentum to gain, some traction early on, and then they didn't really let up at all. They slowed down at certain points, sometimes forced to by Arthedainian defensive positions like the one Eclipse took up. Sometimes just to sort of reset themselves before pushing again into the final layer like they did in the middle. But overall I think they were good value for their win here, and again, you saw the importance of stuff like mass pushing units and trolls to a faction like Angmar. And it is worth mentioning as well that Angmar really are always going to be the very best at these kind of tactics. I think it's why they're the faction everyone loves to hate, because when it comes to defending, and especially high quality defenders as well, Angmar are maybe the best at denying high quality defences that are pretty reliant on skirmishers. They're the best at denying them the ability to do what they do best, if that makes any sense. And especially when you've got the extra little bit of support from Rhudaur to really make up for what Angmar lack a little bit in terms of outright damage. They do make for a pretty scary duo. Whereas Cardolan and Arthedain, while they do have a little bit of differences in terms of what they're good at in terms of skirmishing, Cardolan obviously with their crossbows, Arthedain a little bit more so with standard archery, they are rather the same sort of thing in the sense that they have an infantry line which is designed to be good enough to hold the line with a little bit of damage and quality sprinkled in, but for the most part it's a functional front line, and their skirmishers are what needs to send them over the edge. So they don't really offer anything too different to one another in that regard, but skirmishers are, after all, very, very important for the defences, and it was nearly enough for them to be victorious here. But let's see what did the damage for the three Arthedainian armies. Guardians of the Scepter did very well. I mean, you kind of expect that in a grindier fight such as the ones that Eclipses found themselves in. They are, after all, a more defensive bodyguard unit, and they were going up against a lot of standard Angmar troops, so that's pretty much par for the course for them. The archers did well, as you would expect in a defensive siege like this. You need even basic archers to be certainly cracking 100 kills, and all of them got over 150, and I would say that's acceptable. Again, large armies they were facing, so it was also not terribly surprising. Arthedain men-at-arms, mixed success for them. Some of them doing pretty poorly, some of them doing okay, one of them performing maybe a little bit up and over the edge, but even then, even 152 kills, when you consider that they are now a bigger unit and they should be able to go toe-to-toe with some of these Orcish units a little bit more easily, maybe you could say that it's a little bit undercooked. Arthedain pikemen doing fine, Warns of the North as well. Defenders of FORNOST, that's a disappointing array of kills from them, I would say. Add-in men, plenty of units breaking 100. Again, it's mostly ranged units. The pikes doing nicely, the rangers doing well, Guardians of the Scepter less so, but then they were committed to a position where Froggy really started to push forward pretty quickly. The trebuchet actually got a lot of kills. I may very well have missed a lot of the heavy lifting that trebuchet did, because I don't really remember the trebuchets being all that effective for Arthedain at all in this battle. Maybe it was in melee as well, though, after all that crew with the armour-piercing attacks. And then finally, Sin's army, the Grey Company, 313 kills. For a body-piercing unit, you could argue that's a little bit disappointing, but by the time they were being used, the situation was already getting away from the defenders a little bit, so the fact that Sin was able to get that many kills with them in a pretty grim situation is actually not too bad. The Guardians of the Scepter, you want maybe a little bit more from your bodyguard units, but at least they cracked 100. Dunedain Rangers and Troll Slayers doing well enough. Again, the Defenders of FORNOST, probably the most disappointing singular unit on the field today, which is unfortunate considering they're fighting literally for their own city. Arthedain pikemen. Arthedain men-at-arms for Sin doing actually very, very well, showcasing perhaps their potential. And Sin's trebuchet was alive for longer, so getting 390 is maybe not too surprising, but even then I'm actually kind of surprised. I don't know if we were just supremely unlucky with seeing when the artillery was being used, but there was really only a couple of volleys I saw. Other than that, I thought the trebuchets for the defenders were really quite underwhelming indeed. Perhaps I'm wrong. But there we go. Big thank you to Eclipse for sending yet another showcase battle from the new patch, which is always good to see. There are a few more which I know that they're trying to run. I know that there's Mistrand, I know that there's Khan Doom, new versions of these maps with a little bit more personality. Of course, Khan Doom always had a unique map, but it has been since improved by WK. Mistrand, of course, was just a standard cityscape, and now it has been made much more its own entity, so we will hopefully be seeing those two fairly soon before release. But yeah, other than that, it's really just the continued waiting game, I suppose. Yeah, big thank you to Eclipse for sending this one in. Big thank you to all the players for being a part of this one as well. More than one developer involved in this battle as well, so that's good to see. As far as what's going to be coming up soon, as I've mentioned, I think in a couple of the recordings I've done recently, towards the tail end of June, perhaps into the beginning of July, there will be another channel update video, because I will be restructuring my channel somewhat to try and make things a little bit easier on me, make the quality of the content improve a little bit more so again, because I've been kind of putting that off for a while, in terms of I kind of expect to be moving on from my current job at some point in the near to mid future, and so I've been kind of putting off changing the channel around until then, but I kind of need to do it now. I think we need to move the channel around now and not keep putting it off based on outside circumstances. So we're going to be restructuring a little bit, and hopefully again focused on making it so that the quality of the content of the channel goes up, making it so that my schedule isn't quite such a killer for the channel overall as well. And hopefully this can coincide with the release of this new patch of the game as well, because that would be fairly ideal in terms of what I'm kind of thinking that I might be doing. But we'll see, because between then and now I think I will be going away for work once more, and then we can really start to get our teeth into that when I come back. So June may very well be the last month where we go for the same structure of things, where I release effectively what is always a battle replay on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Instead we'll be shifting things around a little bit, changing things up. And overall, the quality of the content should be able to increase as a result of that. But enough of that. For now, we'll focus on the new patch and all of the previews that we've been getting. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.